The chamber hummed with an ancient, dreadful silence as the Varn Dominion's elite cadets gathered in the Hall of Recorded Histories. They expected a routine briefing, a display of dominance, perhaps a tale of conquest, but instead they were met by the clawed shadow of General Virex, scarred and sunken-eyed, older than any war they'd studied. He had not spoken in nearly a century. Today he chose to speak. "You wish to understand Earth," he began, voice rough as rust scraped across stone. "Then you must understand what happened when their women chose to stop being nice." There were snickers. A few of the younger cadets bared their fangs in amusement, clearly expecting a lecture on human frailty. VA Rex's eyes narrowed. "We invaded their world as a precaution. Your textbooks will tell you that Earth was too fractured to resist, their governments divided, their technologies archaic. The species' males were unruly, and the females compliant. Accommodating. Cooperative." He spat the word as if it burned his tongue. For a moment, his voice dropped into a whisper. "That was our first mistake." The lights dimmed as he activated a projection. Grainy footage of what appeared to be an agricultural district in ruins, its skies choked with ash and static. "This," he said, "was District 8 of the Eurasian Zone. We believed we'd secured it. Our patrols reported no resistance. What they failed to notice was that the resistance wasn't building walls. It was building memory. On screen, a human woman emerged from the smoke. Unarmed. Her coat was torn, blood streaking her temple. She carried a child across her back and led 5 others by the hand. No weapons, no soldiers, just a mother moving through a battlefield like it was a hallway. A few cadets shifted uncomfortably. That woman's name, Virex said slowly, was Dr. Elena Marek. Trauma surgeon. Mother. Civilian. He paused, letting her image linger, flickering against the smoke. She should have been irrelevant. A background figure in the theater of war. And yet, by the end of the cycle, she became the center of our collapse. The scene faded. His gaze scanned the room like a blade. "You must understand something. The women of Earth were not trained as warriors. They weren't commanders or executioners. They were stabilizers, the ones who held together what their men destroyed, the ones who raised their children while burying their dead, who fed villages while bombs fell on cities. They were peacekeepers, healers, negotiators. They were, by all logic, the least dangerous part of their species." His voice hardened, but that illusion died in fire. VA Rex turned and touched a second console. Another clip emerged, diplomatic footage, dated 2346. A young Elena, smiling, shook hands with a Dominion ambassador as humanitarian supplies were loaded onto transport ships. She spoke perfect Varnic. She was composed, gracious, polite. "That woman," VRX muttered, "once saved a squadron of our wounded after an insurgent bombing. She negotiated ceasefires that spared thousands. She believed in compassion, even after we killed her husband, even after we arrested her for aiding non-compliant colonies. She kept believing." The lights dimmed again, casting shadows across the cadets' pale faces. "Until we made one final mistake. We killed her daughter." A sharp silence sliced through the room. The cadets no longer smirked. "She wasn't a target," he continued. "The child was in a refugee sector we considered secure. But a drone malfunctioned. She burned." VRX inhaled as if gathering pieces of himself from a grave. Elena didn't scream. She didn't demand revenge. She returned to her medical station the next day. She stitched soldiers back together, silent. Then she disappeared. The third screen lit up. "This," he growled, "is what followed." A Dominion warship hovered above Earth's orbit. Without warning, its engines exploded in synchronized waves. No missiles, no fleets. Its systems had turned against it. Simultaneously, dozens of supply routes failed. Medical drones short-circuited. Communication relays went offline. In several sectors, Dominion command centers were swallowed by coordinated civilian strikes, flooded with sabotage patterns encoded in maintenance software, homegrown by minds we'd ignored. We traced it all back to a signal. A single transmission broadcast to every node. No voice, just a phrase, "We're done being nice." Now the room held no laughter. Only breathless awe. You think a rebellion needs soldiers? Guns? Blood rage? Varex's voice was a low, dangerous hum. No, it needs conviction. It needs grief strong enough to burn policy. It needs 1,000 hands that once rocked cradles, now pulling wires from the throats of empires. He stepped forward, his bolt casting long shadows. Elena was not alone. Across Earth, women began to act, not with brute force, but with intolerable precision. Teachers who rewrote code in school servers to confuse tracking systems. Nurses who reprogrammed medical units to deliver sedatives to commanding officers. Technicians who sabotaged drones with motherboards soldered by steady hands that once held infants. They weren't fighting. They were ending. Varex gestured to the screens, showing fragments of fallen colonies, deserted Dominion bases, alien generals being led away in chains. We didn't just lose a planet. We lost control. We lost fear. And once fear breaks, so does everything else. One cadet, younger than the rest, dared to speak. But they were women. Varex's stare could have fractured bone. Yes, they were women. And that is why we failed. We saw their softness as surrender. We mistook empathy for obedience. We believed they would always yield, always comfort, always endure. His voice cracked like thunder. We never considered what would happen if they decided to stop. A final clip emerged. Elena Marek, standing in the ruins of a decommissioned Dominion base, sunlight slicing through a broken ceiling. She wasn't smiling. Her face bore the weight of too many funerals. But her eyes were steel. She looked directly into the camera. "If you want peace," she said, "do not ask it from our silence. Ask it from your own." The footage faded. The room was breathless. General Varex turned away, the scars across his back visible even through his armor. "Remember this lesson," he muttered. "Because the galaxy still tells stories of the day they stopped being nice." And with that, he walked out, leaving only silence behind, heavy, echoing, and irreversible. Rain fell in sheets over the ruins of what used to be Kiev Sector 4. The skyline had collapsed into scorched skeletons of steel and concrete, jagged fingers grasping at a colorless sky. Elena Marek stood motionless in the middle of a flooded street, staring at the blood-spattered remains of a Dominion exo-scout. Its armor was twisted inward, eyes scorched out by an explosive charge likely planted in one of the drainage grates. The kill was surgical, clean, efficient, unmistakably human. Behind her, under the cracked archway of an abandoned clinic, a dozen women huddled around a malfunctioning power core. They weren't soldiers. They were technicians, midwives, former educators, supply clerks, women whose lives had been shaped by silence, then shattered by it. Now they soldered by flashlight, whispering strategies with calm authority while transmitting coded frequencies through buried wires that even the Dominion's planetary net hadn't detected. Elena wiped a smear of ash from her cheek and glanced at the youngest of them. Nadia, barely 16, lips trembling as she steadied the wireframe beneath her fingers. "You're shaking," Elena said, voice soft but firm. "I'm scared," Nadia admitted, eyes flicking toward the storm outside. "What they find us?" "They already did," Elena replied. "And we're still standing. That's what scares them now." Nadia nodded, stiffly, and returned to her work. Elena didn't smile. Smiles had become luxuries. But she reached out and rested a hand on the girl's shoulder, just long enough to remind her she wasn't alone. An encrypted ping broke the quiet. A woman named Rima, a former aerospace engineer who now operated under the codename Matron 6, stood and approached Elena with a grin set to her jaw. 3 Dominion patrols rerouted, Rima reported. "We successfully spiked the tracking protocols using the Mariposa virus you developed, but we lost contact with the Parisian cell. No signal for 18 hours. They were holding the last supply routes west of the Alps," Elena murmured. "If they're gone, we'll be cut off," Rima finished, "and they'll consolidate around the nuclear silos again." Elena looked away, her jaw tightening. "Then we'll move." "Where?" Rima pressed, her voice edging toward frustration. "We're running out of safe zones. Every time we go dark, they adapt faster. They're not just responding now, they're predicting. I know, Elena replied. And if we keep losing cells like this, we won't have enough left to finish what we started. Elena turned to face her. Then we won't lose another. Silence pressed between them for a moment. Rima's eyes searched Elena's face for something. Fear, doubt, hesitation, but found none. Only exhaustion carved into every line and a cold, coiled defiance behind her gaze. Rima finally nodded and turned back toward the others. Elena walked alone into the storm. Her boots sank into mud and ash as she stepped through the shell of what had once been a public library. The Dominion had used it as a field office before human operatives rigged the foundation with hydrogen plasma. Now the building whispered with ghosts and smoke. She walked to a broken window and watched as a Dominion dropship cruised across the sky, scanners blinking, its engines roaring with the arrogance of unchallenged power. Once, she'd been afraid of those ships. The first time she saw one descend over her neighborhood, her daughter had clapped her hands in wonder. Are they here to help? She'd asked. Elena had smiled then, even though her stomach twisted. No, sweetheart, they're just passing by. But they hadn't passed by. They'd stayed, and taken, and punished anyone who begged them not to. Now, Elena watched that same class of ship through a cracked lens and thought only of its weak points. The blind spot under its rear stabilizers, the timing delay in its dorsal scans. She thought of the dozens of women across 3 continents who now specialized in bringing them down using software embedded in food distribution manifests. She thought of her daughter and the silence that followed. Footsteps approached. She didn't turn. I told you I didn't want guards, Elena said. I'm not here to guard you, came the reply. The voice was older, marked with a Southern African lilt. It belonged to Major Thandine Ndlovu, once commander of a peacekeeping battalion disbanded during the occupation. Now, she was the tactical mind behind most of the sabotage efforts in the Southern Hemisphere. She stepped beside Elena, arms crossed, rain soaking into her uniform. They've named you on Dominion broadcasts, Thandie said. They're calling you a high-value insurgent, the mother of resistance. Elena snorted softly. They still don't understand. This isn't about me. I'm just the first one who said it out loud. Thandie tilted her head. We're done being nice. It was never about kindness. We didn't smile because we were weak. We were kind because we believed they might stop before we had to change. But they didn't. Thandie looked at her, her face unreadable. You think we can win this? I think we already did, Elena said. They're afraid. Not of our weapons. They've seen better. Not of our numbers. They've crushed larger. They're afraid because they know we're not asking for permission anymore. We're not pleading. We're not negotiating. We're acting. She turned toward the ruins. And the more of us act, the less they can do about it. Thandie gave a short nod. Then it's time. For what? For the next message. The final one. Dominion Command Node is vulnerable in Madrid. We've been tracking their AI latency. One coordinated override, and the whole defense grid cascades. And what do you need from me? Thandie's voice was even. Authorization. Elena didn't hesitate. Send it. And as the command zipped across the makeshift network, bouncing from one relay to the next, through libraries, beneath playgrounds, across the rooftops of burned-out schools, dozens of women stood. Old, young, scarred, tired. Not with flags. Not with medals. With tools, code, memory, and rage. And the Dominion would never again see it coming. Smoke twisted skyward from the shattered ruins of the Madrid command node, black tendrils clawing into a dawn that never quite warmed. The Dominion's once pristine bastion now lay in pieces. Metal hunched over cracked marble, holograms flickering and twitching, as if even the machines themselves could not process what had happened. Stillness blanketed the broken city, broken only by the low hum of disabled drones spiraling into silence. No reinforcements, no air support, no counter-command. The Dominion AI core, once the brain of planetary control, was nothing more than a smoldering echo. In the heart of it all stood Elena Marek, boots planted on fractured stone, her coat torn at the shoulder and streaked with soot. She didn't look like a general. She didn't need to. Her presence, was a command more powerful than any banner. Around her, the others emerged. Fandine Dlovu, Rima, Nadia, and dozens more, every face hardened by loss, every step deliberate, every breath fueled not by vengeance, but by absolute resolve. Elena's fingers curled around the charred edge of a broken Dominion data panel. The display had frozen mid-broadcast. The holographic seal of the Empire fractured, its central eye gouged through by static. She stared at it, remembering the way her daughter's fingers had once traced that very symbol on a classroom wall, thinking it stood for peace. She let the panel drop. Nadia stepped up beside her, ash caking her hair, blood on her wrist, though it wasn't her own. Her eyes flicked to the wreckage, then to Elena. "It's done," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "No," Elena said. This was just the signal. Across the continent, as planned, synchronized nodes burst into life. The underground resistance, once a scattering of whispered rumors and half-finished messages, now erupted like wildfire. In Cairo, a mother rerouted a food convoy into rebel territory. In New York, an old archivist used stolen credentials to corrupt Dominion census data, rendering occupation units blind. In Singapore, children once orphaned by orbital bombardment hacked into the Imperial surveillance net and looped security feeds across a dozen sectors. From the tundras of Russia to the jungles of Brazil, the movement unfolded not with fanfare, but with precision. The world shifted. Inside the Madrid rubble, a Dominion officer lay pinned beneath a support beam, his breathing shallow. Rima found him first, rifle steady, steps slow. His silver armor was dented, the once gleaming surface now caked in blood and dust. He looked up at her, his expression not afraid, but confused, as though the reality unraveling around him no longer fit the logic he had believed absolute. "You're just," he rasped, coughing. "You're just women. How did you?" Rima didn't answer. She didn't need to. Behind her, Elena approached. She crouched beside the officer, her expression unreadable. "You were taught to see us as background," she said softly. "Nurses, clerks, voices at the edge of your orders. You never asked who made your food, who passed your armor, who listened while you ranted about conquest over coffee. You never imagined that the hands that served you could also destroy you. You're not soldiers," he gasped. "No," Elena agreed. "We're the storm you didn't see coming." She stood. The officer stared up at her, blinking in the smoke. "You won't win. You've disabled one system. We're the Empire. We will rebuild." Elena looked down at him, not with hatred, but with something colder, something final. "And we're the ones who refuse to be quiet again." She walked away. Rima followed. The officer said nothing more. As the team regrouped, Fandy pulled up a tactical display on a salvage tablet. The Dominion's planetary grid blinked offline in segments. Madrid had been the central pillar. With it gone, every outpost connected to it fell into disarray. Orders delayed. Units isolated. Communications disrupted. It was the domino effect they'd planned for, but it was unfolding faster than expected. North America's grid collapsed within the hour, Fandy reported. South Africa's still holding, but the AI there was subordinate. Won't last long. Pacific Command is silent. Casualties? Elena asked. Fandy hesitated. Hi. Especially in Tokyo. They didn't have time to evacuate before the node imploded. But their transmission got out. Elena lowered her eyes. They knew what they were risking. They made the choice, Fandy said. All of them did. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then, Nadia raised her head. So what now? Do we keep hitting targets? Do we fight every Dominion force until they surrender? Elena looked at her, not as a child, but as a soldier, a woman forged in this crucible. No, she said. We show the rest of them how to stop being afraid. In the days that followed, a wave swept across the stars. News of the Madrid incident spread faster than Dominion censors could silence it. On occupied moons, women sabotaged weapons depots. In orbiting colonies, engineers overloaded propulsion cores to create EMP bursts. Even in the halls of the Empire's capital, whispers stirred, of Earth's uprising of the day women stopped asking for mercy and started demanding freedom. No one remembered the official titles of the Dominion's planetary governors, but everyone remembered the name of the movement, the last kindness, a phrase scrawled across walls in 20 languages, a message broadcast at impossible frequencies, a reminder that kindness, once taken for weakness, had been withdrawn, not because it was lost, but because it had been exhausted. And in the years that followed, even after the Empire fractured, after the Dominion's banners fell one by one, stories were still told. Around alien campfires, across merchant tables, in training fields of newly liberated worlds, they spoke of the day the human women stopped being nice. Not out of cruelty, not out of vengeance, but because they were finally heard, because they were finally free, and because the galaxy would never again forget what happened when they rose.